So Lori, as plan sponsors are looking at costs, what are the things that they should be considering?
Well, from a cost perspective, I think the key thing that plan sponsors are doing very well today is that they are reviewing their costs. And that's becoming easier and easier as the costs are being made available to them from the record keepers. And we're seeing some progress in that area. But it's more than just understanding costs. It's also benchmarking costs, and benchmarking them in such a way that you're not just using your record keeper's data, but you're using objective benchmarking data. And the importance of that actually has come out recently in a lawsuit that was recently dismissed, where over and over again throughout the lawsuit, it was cited that the benchmarking process had taken place. It was thorough, it was diligent, it was done using independent sources of information, and it was well documented. And for me, that really indicates a good blueprint for ways to fight these types of fee lawsuits that we see periodically coming into the DC environment.
And when you look at costs, what are the components that a plan sponsor should be thinking about or considering?
From a cost perspective, when it comes to evaluating a DC plan, you certainly want to look at the total plan cost. That's very important and understand that. But it is also important to understand the component costs. And these include things like not only the investment management fee, but administrative fees, which may be actually embedded in the expense ratio of the funds, and of course transaction-based cost. The issue with getting to some of these costs is that they may not even be published in a prospectus, and they may vary record keeper to record keeper. So you really have to drill in and dig in and understand what each of the component pieces are, and I would argue also benchmark the component pieces to make sure that they are reasonable as well.
And when you think of custom strategies, is there an advantage in having a custom strategy to looking at total plan cost?
Absolutely. The custom strategies may be more transparent, and they may be easier to get a handle on because all the pieces are already disaggregated. You're not trying to investigate where the costs are because you, as the plan sponsor, have built the strategies and understood the costs as you built them.
What about a plan sponsor using collective investment trusts or separately managed accounts? Does that make sense for them to use structures other than mutual funds as they build their plans?
Again, from a large plan sponsor perspective, it absolutely makes a ton of sense to use the institutional structures like collective trusts, separate accounts, and of course institutional share classes of mutual funds. And again, if we look at the fee lawsuits out there, some of them really have centered on the use of these institutional structures in large plans where it can be very cost effective. I think one thing plan sponsors should certainly do is to document that they've reviewed at least document that they've reviewed the use of these types of structures and document why they haven't used them if they indeed find that they don't want to have them in their plans. But it can, again, be very cost effective, and for plan sponsors of plans $1 billion and above in assets, you can find real cost savings with some of these structures.
Do custom strategies make sense from a total plan cost perspective?
They can. Again, if you're looking at a larger plan and you've looked and in many cases the larger plan has already built a very institutional structure with separate accounts and collective trusts and institutional share classes of mutual funds. That is a structure that I think really you need to examine the possibility of a custom target date fund because of the cost and the open architecture impact of it as well.
If you were working with a plan sponsor and you wanted to help them bring their costs down to the lowest possible level, what would you suggest to them?
Well, I would suggest that they start from the point of view of saying, what funds do we already have in our lineup, and do we have the most cost-effective structures for each of the core funds? And then from there, look at the possibility of the custom target date fund. Obviously, it doesn't make as much sense to have a custom target date fund if you have a bunch of retail mutual funds in your core structure. I think the other thing you want to make sure you look at as a plan sponsor is to see how well your record keeper is equipped to handle a custom target date fund, because that can add cost, and you want to make sure that in the aggregate it's going to be cost effective, even though you have these fabulously inexpensive structures within the plan and within the plan's core funds. You also want to make sure that in building the custom target date fund, you don't introduce costs through the record keeping setup costs and so forth.
And what if that client has the defined benefit plan?
And if the client has a defined benefit plan, certainly that's an environment in which they're probably very familiar with the institutional structure, with having a custodian that's unbundled from their record keeper. And they're probably comfortable in that environment. And I would say that those types of plan sponsors should certainly be thinking about custom target date funds.
What standard does the Department of Labor hold plan sponsors to relative to managing their plan cost?
ERISA requires that a plan's fees and expenses and costs be reasonable. So towards this end, fiduciaries have a responsibility to engage in a prudent process, and process is very important under ERISA, a prudent process to determine that the fees the plan is paying are reasonable. Another key component of this process is transparency. For a fiduciary to prudently determine that fees are reasonable, they have to be able to understand what the fees are. So that's a reason why custom strategies can actually offer a fiduciary advantage, because it puts the plan sponsor in the driver's seat and it makes it possible for funds to be more transparent.